Hey everyone, it's April 21st, 2019, and it's episode 179 of Percussion. My name is Casey Cangelosi, and with me today is Carly Vigna.
Hi, everyone.
Carly, where are our co-hosts? What's the deal?
I don't know. It's like they're busy on Easter Sunday, something like that.
They have
Imagine that.
they have gigs or something. I've seen a lot of timpani posts, a lot of chime posts, a lot of. Did you have an Easter gig?
I did. I was playing timpani on a beach in Key Largo, 6:45
Cool.
a.m. service.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm kind of recovering from that.
Well, hey, we have actually a shout out from some listeners, and we got a message from the Beat family. Lee Beat in Birmingham, UK, said that they listen as a family and they've never missed an episode. So, the Beat family, thanks so much. And Carly, if you want to make a pun about the last name Beat, I think that'd be appropriate since it's or Kelly, if you want to do that, you're welcome to. Anyway, yeah, thanks so much, Libby, and your family for listening. That's really nice of you guys to, yeah, be listening every episode and as a family. So, hey, so have you? Of course, you've seen this news, Carly, the Notre Dame fire. Are you all read up on it? Do you know what's going on?
Read up some on it, yeah. It's amazing. I was kind of thinking about this and wondering. I mean, I know how significant it is, but I was thinking it seems to have reached and touched just about everyone. People that have been in the cathedral and people that have never been in France. So I was thinking about why. Um, I don't know. Maybe just that it seems like it's so big and so well established, and also like the birthplace of so much of the music that we play and that we study, and everything kind of came from there, that it's shocking that it could just catch on fire.
I know. Oh, I was surprised it got so out of control because I was actually with some students in the little pizza joint next door, and my student Rachel just said, "Holy crap, Notre Dame's on fire!" And I thought, well, how bad could this get? It's this giant stone cathedral. How out of control could the fire get? And it got frustrating to watch because you started to wonder, like, hey, why aren't they putting it out? Like, how is it still going? So yeah, it was pretty amazing that all happened. Apparently, rush hour traffic. There are many roads that lead up to Notre Dame, and they literally consider this the heart and the central point of Paris. In fact, all points of measurement in Paris are measured from Notre Dame, I read. So actually, Notre Dame is like zero. And then the place wherever 1 mile away is 1 mile away from the radius of Notre Dame. And that's like how they literally measure everything in Paris. So yeah, there's lots of ways to get there, but apparently with rush hour traffic and everything that's happening that day, it was just impossible. I guess the fire started right under the spire, they think. And remember, we're recording this on April 21st, so we may have a whole lot new information by the time this episode is released. But right now, they're saying right under the spire, which is, of course, the very center of the cross basilica. And then the fire just got crazy and the tower collapsed, and that made everything so much worse. I read that at this point but before the fire, they were undergoing a $185 million restoration, and the funding for this type of restoration and now more restoration after the fire is very strange because the cathedral is property of the French government, but it's basically on loan to the archdiocese. They use it for free and they sort of oversee things in it. So there's a separation of church and state in France, like here in the US. So it's kind of strange, like who would pay for this restoration? So even if the French government wants to pay for it, which I think generally they do, it's a little muddy and it's a little tricky. But already there have been so many donations. I think $500 million was pledged just within like a day of the fire happening. And the president of France vowed to restore the cathedral within 5 years. They think, let's see, it will take 20 to 30 years to bring Notre Dame back from this fire. They saved a
Oh,
lot of the key artifacts, the organ, the bells, the supposed crown of thorns that's housed in the cathedral. And Notre Dame means Our Lady of Paris, is its translation, because the full name is Notre Dame de Paris, which just means Our Lady of Paris. So yeah, like Carly said, if some of our young listeners, especially, you might not know, Notre Dame is a really central part of why music is the way it is today. It's our first written record and account of the development of polyphony. So polyphony, it seems like something we really take for granted today, but that's two independent voices working together, like a Bach fugue is, of course, polyphony. It's imitative polyphony, but that was a big deal way back then. And it's because of composers, Periton and Leonin. This is all in your Grout history textbook. That, I'm sorry, those of you who know this who are rolling their eyes right now, but it's those composers that are have the accounts of this development. And so yeah, it's an important place for music. And on a percussive note, there's two bell towers at Notre Dame, and the bells in those two towers, weigh 2 to 5 tons each, except for the big bell, which is called the Emmanuel Bell. It weighs 13 tons. And supposedly, this fire was, the last thing I read, it was 20 minutes from being unstoppable. And had they not stopped it within the next 20 minutes, the fire would have gotten to the bell towers. And you think, oh, it's stone. How could it do any damage? But if you YouTube some video inside those bell towers, there is so many wood staircases and lattices and frames, all wood supporting those giant bells. So those are hundreds of feet up in the air. If that 13-ton bell fell, which they said was a real danger, it could have taken a lot of stone with it. So I had to read that for that to really make sense to me. Like, how could fire take down a big stone structure like that? But I think a big danger was the falling of these giant bells.
Yeah, and you think about all of the pews that are there, and like you say, staircases, and that's a lot of dry kindling because that's been there for a really long time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I've been to a few cathedrals over the years. I'm sure a lot of us have, and it seems like they're always undergoing restoration. They're always undergoing some type of fix, and there's always those lattice frames to fix this wall or fix this one artifact on top or this one statue on top or something. And so you think like, oh, construction tools, electrical things. There's got to be so many ways to start a fire when they're undergoing that. And I'm sure, by the time this is released, we'll probably know the real reason and how it started exactly.
I think it's interesting. It seems like not too many people are talking about how it started. We're focusing on this is what happened, this is what was saved, this is what was damaged.
Yeah,
But I read
yeah.
something, maybe electrical, kind of an electrical fire, just a spark started it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I feel like there's so many easy things to point to for how an accidental fire like that could happen in a construction site. It's like basically a construction site. Of course, some people are saying, oh, there's already conspiracy theories about,
Yeah.
Of course, yeah, the U.S. government started it to the fuel feuds between, it's just, yeah, there's always going to be that, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let me introduce Kelli here. You guys, our guest today, she's a drummer, and please, Kelli, correct me on any of this or add anything or update anything you'd like to this. She is a drummer, a singer, a percussionist, an author, a teacher, and she hosts this fantastic drumming and percussion history series on YouTube, which I'm just dying to ask her a whole lot about, that you guys have to check out. Look up Kelli Rae Tubbs percussion drumming on YouTube and find this channel, because you will learn stuff. I've learned a lot by watching these videos. And she documents many of the sound effects from the silent movie era, as well as the drum set evolution and historical usage. She's been interviewed and published in magazines Drum and a new one to me, Vintage Drums and Legendary Sounds. So welcome, Kelli Rae Tubbs. How's it going?
Thank you. It's going really well, and thank you for asking me to be your guest today.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, our pleasure. Well, sorry to start with, kind of some down news about this cathedral, but what's some good news happening for you right now?
Oh, I'm in the middle of not only tax season like everybody else, but grant writing season.
Great.
So I'll be finishing my 5th or 6th grant here in about as many weeks, grant application, I should say. And it is some of the grant money that I've received in the past that has allowed me to fund that series of videos that you found on YouTube, the Back in Time series and the Revival series.
Mhm.
So so that's been great fun to do, and a great education for me, just to pull my facts together to present the information that I do in those videos. But then, for example, in one of the Revival series, I tucked my own calfskin head for an 1892 snare drum, and that's part of my collection. And so grant money funded the lessons I took on how to tuck.
Uh-huh.
And so it's like one thing feeds the other, feeds the next thing, and it's been really quite an adventure. So these grant applications mean a lot to me, and then I get to just kind of disperse all of that knowledge out as soon as I've got it.
And part of this grant, you had a grant from the East Central Regional Arts Council there in Minnesota, right?
Correct.
And part of the grant was you got to study with, oh my gosh, I lost his name. He's a very famous drummer, and I can't think of it right now.
Daniel Glass.
So
Yeah, I got to study with Daniel Glass.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah. So,
and, who himself is this amazing historian. And if you haven't seen his DVDs, The Century Project and Traps, you need to go find those, because it was so interesting, because I was going down this historical path before I ever met him. History, it's odd, because history was my very least favorite subject in school. But about 20 years ago, a little bit more than that by now, I started getting very interested in genealogy and trying to find out where my last name came from.
right.
And so I, was looking into that. And when I understood the relationship of me to my great great grandfather, or my great 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 grandfather, and the dates that they lived in, and realizing that, oh, Mozart, was born after my great 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 grandfather.
Wow, right.
And it just put a whole different perspective on my relationship with history and with music history. And other things that kind of came up to light was that in Tennessee, where my dad was born and raised, there are 3 towns that are named after characters in the Mikado.
Mhm.
And the Mikado's premiere in Tennessee happened, a couple of years after it premiered during the time that my great great grandfather and my great grandfather were both alive, which is just crazy. It's like, to think that those two things are juxtaposed, and that they could have, been a part of those first audiences in Tennessee for that musical, that opera. So, just think about things like that. It puts an entirely different spin on what you think music is and was, and how you can relate to it.
Well,
So,
speaking of your YouTube channel, I would love to show our viewers just a couple snippets from,
please do.
yeah, from what you have. So I've queued up just a couple. So so this is William Ludwig III, right?
That's correct.
And check out what he's about to do. This is, I sometimes do a segment called "What's the Sound?" and this is a pretty clear as a bell sound. Um,
It
yeah, no
is.
pun intended with Notre Dame, but yeah, you're gonna know exactly what this sound is. So that's absolutely crazy and dangerous. This is another really cool one, I think. This is so cool. Can you just tell us, we talked a little about the grant, but please tell us, like, what inspired you to do this? How did you do this? What did the grant afford you to do? These videos are so well produced. If you have I mean, yeah, just please tell us all about
Oh.
it.
Well, with the grant money that I received, I've received 5 different grants. So they've each given me a little bit different things. The first was strictly for lessons with Daniel Glass, and for some study materials, and actually also for 2 pre-made calfskin heads for a snare drum that I have that dates back to 1887. And so, just and my purpose with that is to give drummers today an opportunity to hear and to really be a part of what our drumming peers did 100 years ago, because their lives were so much like ours. You can look in newspapers and find clippings that say that somebody lost this drum, and and so there's a want ad for that, and somebody else is selling their stuff and they need to sell it fast, and it just, their lives were our same lives, just 100 years apart, but they had different challenges. So in studying with Daniel and also studying with William F. Ludwig III, I've gotten to, and other people as a part of that as well, with specialized skills, just really gotten a better understanding through lesson time and through conversation and through study materials and other and skill building sessions, I guess I should put it like that. Been able to learn all about that era, and with the drums that I already have, then I'm able to actually bring those out to the public and do performances with them so that other people can see what this is like, and what it was like for our for audiences 100 years ago. So I had a clinic here in town as a part of one of those grants. It's one of the requirements is that you do a project for the public. And so I did a session where I did ragtime drumming with a pianist, and I did some double drumming. And I thought, what better to do than Stars and Stripes Forever, like doing all parts together, the crash drum, or the crash cymbal, the bass drum, and the snare drum, all by myself using that double drumming type of technique, which I learned from Daniel. So it's just fun, and every little bit that I learn and everything that I see in an antique method book that I pick up or a photo that I pick up leads, it puts these 2 dots that feel very separate from each other and puts a connection between them. It's like, oh, I get that now, and catalogs, things like that, things that you wouldn't imagine would come in handy. But then you see something else that then makes that connection for you. And so this whole process with all of the grants and all of the learning I've gotten to do as a part of the grants has just been so much fun. It's just a kind of a never-ending mystery that you get to solve yourself. And so there's not, it's like a crossword puzzle that you don't have the answer to, but you can get to the answer if you find enough resources.
Wow. So,
if that makes any sense at all.
After watching it, certainly does. And I have to say, speaking of tying dots together, just watching some of these and seeing just all the sound effects that people were responsible for, it suddenly places what symphonic musicians have to sometimes do in the back, like what we're asked to do, or like why there are these goofy things that we're asked to do, and all of a sudden it's like, no, it's placed now, it's like there's this big history of percussionists were doing those things.
Right. I did a clinic at a high school in Blackwell, Oklahoma in February, and I took a suitcase full of my instruments, and we also made a sound effect instrument down there called a crash box. And that's that when you have an impact of something on screen, you can use a crash box to make that happen. And so we made that right there in class.
Cool.
And yeah, with things that the teacher had brought in, and a couple things that I had brought down here to contribute to it. And after I gave a demonstration and played along with a silent film clip, then I brought another film clip along and showed it to them, and kind of taught the class where it was that this kind of sound effect could be used and that sound effect could be used at this other place. And I handed out all of the instruments, and then they got to do what our predecessors did 100 years ago. And it was just a hoot watching them, and they had fun, and it was just a complete blast.
Oh yeah, that sounds way fun. What do you got, Carly?
Yeah, Kelly, I think I had fun looking at some of your historical videos, and I think the work you're doing is so important because I find today there's kind of two types of research and information we can find, and either the information is like immediate, you can look it up, it's on Wikipedia, it's on every page as soon as you Google a topic, or it's really hard to find any information, and what you have to do is go to the source, which is what you're doing, studying with people that kind of learned this tradition. And I'm sure that the grants have helped you a lot to be able to do that. So I'm wondering, do you have any advice for other musicians who see kind of this gap or this need to kind of go from seeing the problem or seeing the need for study and then finding grant money to make it happen?
There are a lot of different kinds of grant monies available for individuals. Then there's a different pocket of money that is for organizations. So sometimes it's a matter of partnering up with a not-for-profit organization who can apply on your behalf and pay you for your time. I've never had that. All of the grants that I've had, 100% of the grant money that I receive, I have to spend to other people. I don't get to keep any of that myself. And there are other fellowships where you can keep that money, and that pays you for your time to create new art or things like that. But for me, it's not as important that I get to keep it, but that I get to do it, because it's anything that you learn, it's better than a book, because nobody can take it from you. You have it all the time. It's not something, well, I suppose you can lose it later on in life, but hopefully it sticks with you for a little while. But yeah, so for me, it was much less important to get to keep grant money than it is to be able to do something with that money. So it paid for the videographer, who's a local fellow to me. And so he, as an artist, is being supported by the grant money I've gotten, and as a video artist. And the musicians that I hire are supported in the clinics that I've done here locally, because I get to, I get to pay them to do their craft, supporting me doing my thing. So
how many of these things did you have in place, as in like access to instruments, Mr. Ludwig III? Like how many of those did you have ready to go and you could put in the grant package and proposal?
You can't have anything pre-done.
Okay. But you can say, I hate, this is why this is going to work. I have these instruments. I have these access to the following people. How much of that was
yeah. So when you apply for a grant, you have to have the resumes of all of the people that are key people. So the resumes of the musicians, the resumes of your experts, no matter what kind of expert it is that they are. You have to have your plan ready. You have to have the budget ready. You have to have quotes. You have to have a plan of what your project is going to be if your grant requires a project. And 4 of the 5 grants that I've received required a project, which was a public event. And in addition to the deliverables, which in my case were the videos.
Cool.
So, yeah. So there's a lot that goes on. You have to be a good instruction follower. You have to be a good record keeper. You have to be willing and able to navigate hoops that are necessary, because that money comes from taxpayer money a lot of time. And in that case, they have a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers to ensure that their money was spent properly. So it's all really important, but you get to do a lot of really great things with it.
Yeah, sure. Have you ever connected with the Percussive Art Society Museum in Indianapolis?
I toured that back in November. Yeah. And in fact, Daniel Glass and Nicholas White, who is a great collector of sound effect instruments himself, he's got a collection that is probably not rivaled by too many other people. It's an amazing collection. And Dr. Denny Brown, who's a professor emeritus at UMass Amherst, the four of us put a presentation together, and Bill Ludwig did a cameo appearance, helping us out with his railroad sound effect and also with his Surefire machine. And we performed at PASIC in 2017, and 2 silent films, and it was a hoot. We had so much fun preparing it, and it was just a wonderful time, and got to demonstrate all of these instruments. And Nick brought most of them, and I brought a couple myself. So.
Wow. I think on one of your videos, either you or Bill mentioned theaters would hire 3 percussionists, like regular percussionists. This used to be a very regular thing, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it really depended on where the theater was located. Were they metropolitan or were they rural, far away from people? And so some theaters would only have a pianist who might do a couple of sound effects. Other people, for example, Viola Smith, a very famous woman drummer from Wisconsin. Her family owned an opera house in the small town in Wisconsin where they lived. And her family showed films from time to time, silent films, and they actually never accompanied the films. She recalls her sister playing piano in between reels, but never for the film itself. So, different places did different things. Others who had a pianist might then hire a percussionist or a couple of percussionists, and others had full small orchestra, theater orchestras. And there was music that was published specifically for that purpose, just, for the purpose of playing in a hotel lobby or for a silent film. Zamishnik was an arranger who did volumes and volumes of music, which are, it's like the titles are dramatic hurry, so it's like you get the emotion that you're trying to convey through the music in the title, right. Or this love ballad or something. It's great. It's really wonderful.
Well, and I guess that's sort of how film sound effects are still today. It's just not live. It's all in studio, right?
Right. Yeah. So out of the sound effect drummers from the silent film era came Foley artistry. So. Okay,
can you explain Foley artistry a little bit?
I that's kind of a different era, and so I haven't really studied that. But I do know that I think for me the difference is that it's not performed live. That you might go out to the field to capture the real sound using engineering equipment and playing that, or you might change the speeds of things. And so I think for me, there is a distinction between the two, but not for everybody.
Gotcha. It's really fun when you look up these sound effect artists. I mean, there is a craft to it. I mean, just the way you all are demonstrating the silent movie sound effects and techniques. These people, I remember seeing, I think it was 2 sisters that do, or maybe it was a mother-daughter, but they do all these sound effects on major films, and they're in a studio and there's microphones everywhere, of course, but there's this craft to what they're doing. They're like just playing in a tub of water with their hands, but you can tell they've practiced it. It's like there's a technique to how they're doing that, or how they're smashing some celery together, and they're completely serious. It's very cool. I was gonna wonder if does the Ludwig company still sell any? I mean, probably not, right? Do they still sell any of these sound effect kits?
Well, he is no longer associated with the Ludwig Drum Company, which is now owned by Selmer.
Selmer, right?
Yeah. He has his own drum company, but the Ludwig company does still sell sound effects, and many companies do. So.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, very cool. What do you got there, Carly?
So Kelly, I wonder if you want to talk to us a little bit about what your performing career is like. What are you up to these days, aside from all the research and everything else that you're doing?
Yeah, besides the clinics and doing things for grants, one of the most recent gigs that I've done, I've kind of taken a little bit of time off here to get grant work done and things like that. But I've been able to go down for the past 2 winters down to Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. And like I say, Tennessee is a little bit of a second homeland for me. But I've been performing in a theater there called the Smoky Mountain Opry, doing their Christmas show. And it's crazy because in 66 days you put on 110 shows, and it's all Christmas music. And I thought to myself, the first season I did this, I thought, am I going to be ruined on Christmas music forever?
Right.
I've never done that many performances of the same thing and do it every day with, no days off. It's you're there every day, with the exception of heading up to PASIC. But it's like, can I even stand this, to do this for a little bit more than 2 months? And the answer to that is yes. And I still liked the songs at the end of the season, which is nice, and played some of the same ones the second season. And still am not ruined on Christmas music or those songs. But what a fun time. It's just a crazy, crazy performance opportunity, because it's like a variety show, and you're on this huge band cart, is what they call it, and that holds all of the musicians and has a separate staircase in the middle. It moves 20 or so feet forward and back on the stage.
Wow.
You're sharing the stage at some point with 2 camels and a burro for a live nativity. And the number has people flying by wire and laser lights and flame pots and flash pots. And it's just like, I'm not sure how those 2 things really match up, but they make it happen. So
Wow.
it's been fun.
The times I've never done 100 of one show, but the times I've done musical or operas, by the time you get to show number 10 or so, you start to notice, the bassoonist is putting their feet up on the chair and watching up on stage, and everyone just gradually relaxes more and more, and I'm sure show, 50 feels much, much different than show 1.
Well, I suppose that there are times when there's a curtain in front of us where the band cart is all the way to the back, and there's a blackout curtain, so we are actually not seen on stage, and we're on stage the whole time. So it's a very different thing. We're very forward facing and very much a part of the show. The opening number is instrumental, so it's all us. And I have always worked very hard at trying to memorize my music, the whole book. And just because I think it's a better experience for the audience to have somebody who's not just simply invested in looking at what notes are coming up. It's like, I'd rather have wrong notes and be off the book. I'd rather have right notes, obviously, but if I'm going to have wrong notes, I'd rather have it be because I'm off the book and I, just missed that part, but I'm there and a part of that audience experience fully, for the audience members.
It's kind of easier to be fully engaged that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, 1,400 seat theater. And we had a lot of sellout crowds, and just, it's lovely when people actually, want to be at a show. They've paid good money to be there. They want to be there. They're happy because, some families come in, all decked out in blinking Christmas hats or whatever. And it's fun. It's just a fun atmosphere, and a lot of really talented singers and dancers and musicians, and a lot of lessons to learn about a very high production type of show like that. It's very different from the community theater things that I've done in the past. Very, very different, and definitely worth the adventure to go down. It's like a little bit more than 1,000 miles away from home for me to get there. So I have to find a place to live. I have to find a lot of things. I have to bring clothes enough for 3 seasons, and then instruments as well. So it's a lot to think about and a lot to prepare, but the lessons that you learn in preparing for something like that carry you through the next adventure that you've got.
Yeah, of course. Well, yeah, you mentioned it being so fun, and yeah, of course, the shows I've done, it's the only bad thing about that is you can't do it all the time. It's such great work, it's great pay, it's a blast, it's good music, but we would do it all the time if it was available all the time.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, another aspect of your career is your teaching. Looks like you have a very like thorough part of your webpage dedicated to teaching and getting students, and it seemed really, really organized. And I just, every time I've told students, hey, well, you can always set up a private teaching studio, when you're trying to fill in the holes, say, between freelance work or between job applications, or you're waiting for stuff to work. Can you tell us a little about just how you might advise setting up, like digging in, like, making your own private teaching studio and how you do it, how you
Yeah,
like to do it?
I don't do that a ton. It is very well organized, and that's part of my modus operandi for sure is that organization. But because I'm not reliably home anymore, I don't do a lot of teaching. I rely more on clinics. But yeah, there are a couple of really great resources out there for music teachers, and how to set up your private practice and how to set up a studio, all of those great things. And I also got some really great advice from Jim Riley, who's a
Hmm.
drummer for Rascal Flatts. And he's got a great studio set up. And I consulted with him for a little while and learned some of his best secrets and best tips. And that's the important thing, I think, with anything that we as percussionists, as drummers, as musicians, as any kind of creative, is to find your expert and really dig into what they have and come prepared. There are people that you wouldn't imagine would give you their time, will give you their time, or you can buy lesson time, depending on who it is. And but come prepared, have your list of questions ready, and get to it, get to business. So.
Right. Well, Carly, you've done this in a couple cities at this point now, right? Set up your own private
Yeah, yeah.
studio.
One of
Anything
the
to add?
things that I've found in my experience that makes everything smoother is really clear expectations. So that's why I saw on your website, Kelly, you have like policies and here's the supplies you need. And that's probably one of the things that's hardest to figure out in the beginning. But, you just find out really quickly, like you have clear expectations. And then anybody that doesn't want to follow your policies or doesn't like the expectations, they, might not continue with you. But then, those are probably hours better spent with other projects or other students anyway. But
Right.
Well, Kelly, you mentioned that you're working on some new grants right now,
I
and
am.
I'm imagining what else you could be up to. Can you share anything? What you're trying to do next, or what the next big project is?
Yes, the next big thing that is on my list of things to do is to tour with a touring Broadway production or Broadway-like production, musical, or with Cirque du Soleil. And
Nice.
I auditioned for Cirque du Soleil back in October and did not get the role. It's so hard because I don't know how many, whether that's tens or hundreds or thousands of people who are applying for one position, but that's the way that it is. And I submitted my materials and I did a really solid job on that. But progressive rock, which was kind of the closest thing that I could style that I could relate that to, has never ever been anything I've played in the past. I listened to some what would be considered in the family tree of progressive rock back in the late 70s and early 80s, but I've never played any of it. So again, it's finding your expert. I've got a 10-piece Tama drum set, and I had taken a couple of lessons from a guy in San Diego, Vic Stojak, who's my expert there on just getting an introduction to that much real estate as a drummer, right? Because I just hadn't done that. So took a little time with him and just to get accustomed to that those all of those extra options. And then my progressive rock expert of choice is Brandon Koo, who is a drummer out of Singapore. And so I sent him an email and I said, okay, Brandon, this is what I'm going to do. I've got 2 weeks to get these materials done. This is a style I've never played. Oh yeah, and I have to learn how to play a double kick pedal. This is what I've got.
Not for the
And
Broadway show, right? Double bass pedal.
Yeah, no, but for Cirque du Soleil for sure.
Oh, okay.
Mm.
Wow.
Yeah, and so it's like here's what I have to do. I've got 2 weeks to do it and to film it. And his response was beautiful. He's like, "Let's do this, Kelly. Okay, let's make it happen." And so I had lessons at 11 o'clock or midnight at night, which was noon the next day for him. And we got to it, submitted my videos. I did not get the role, but in January I learned that I was put on their candidate database. So
Cool.
I've got my foot in the door, and so that is still that's the next thing that I'm still working toward. So taking more lessons. One of the grants then is to take lessons from Brandon on a regular basis to get some more fundamentals on that progressive rock style that will open me up as a player in many different ways that I'm not currently open. I've got, the a lot of different kinds of skill sets between jazz and funk and blues and country and then the old school traditional jazz and earlier, but not this progressive rock. And so that's one focus, and I'll find out next month if that grant will be approved or not awarded. Another kind of builds on that. It's from a different organization, but it would be a larger opportunity with more money associated with it, and also to get some equipment that I need, some cases for this 10-piece drum set, which I don't have, because if I'm going to get a gig on it, I'm going to need to move it around.
Mhm.
So things like that, other study materials and different people to study with as well. Another grant application, which I'm in the middle of writing that one now this week. It's due on the 26th. And then I just also applied for a grant to the National Endowment for the Humanities for a digital project, and that would be specifically to get money that they would pay me money to allow me the time to research and also to film more videos in the Back in Time and Revival series.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's hard. It's like you have to kind of divide up what portions of projects sometimes you can get fulfilled by this grant or that grant, and then you're in the running with so many different other qualified people. So you have to be a strong writer. So in that case, you find your expert, your writing expert,
Right.
who can not only speak to the masses but can also understand the language that you're trying to present and fix what you wrote.
I remember my father talking. My dad's a mathematician, and he talks about grants a long time ago. They weren't so descriptive, like what they're looking for. This is a
Mm.
grant for this, and this. And he said he hates the way things have changed because it seems like people now choose their projects based on what grant money is available. I don't know.
Yes.
It sounds like you've got your project ideas really clearly laid out. Have you ever run up against that where you think like, well, shoot, I could really get this grant if I modified my goal, or if I like I have you had to wrestle with that ever?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, most of the grants for musical projects that I see, they are for a CD project because they are songwriters, or it's for this kind of arrangement for that kind of band, jazz ensembles. And I'm not really that kind of a musician. I could be, but I don't choose to be. And so I have to incorporate things from time to time that are less interesting to me, but will still allow me to achieve my objectives and will still allow me to get smarter and
Mhm.
to be a more well-rounded and more employable musician. And that's my goal. So whatever I need to do to become more employable is and just have a better foundation is what I'm going to do.
Yeah, sure, sure. Can you talk a little about your background as far as your like education for
Oh,
percussion?
sure. It's interesting because I knew when I was 3.5 years old that I wanted to be a musician. It was already solid at that point. And and I started to take a little bit of piano lessons when I was in first grade, had some guitar in fifth, and then started drums in seventh. I went through all of the junior high and high school bands and into college then with a music performance degree, and was playing full time. I kind of did office work, but then was also leaning toward and growing toward playing full time, which I did for a few years. And then I had a band breakup, a big band breakup. And at that point, then I changed directions completely and was in I was in a very different career path for about the last 20 years up until 2016, when that again abruptly changed. And then I thought, this is my last best opportunity to be a full-time musician again. So it's been a little bit of touch and go, and some points in between where I did play, but a lot of downtime where I wasn't able to.
Kelli, one of the things that's so striking, even just before we even spoke, but hearing you talk about all the work that you do, is that you're not afraid to admit what you don't know and like kind of dive into a brand new topic. And it's something I think a lot of us as humans, like our egos get in the way sometimes, and we don't want to do new things. We don't want to try new things, especially sometimes the further we get in our careers. Like, you don't want to be a novice at something or like learning something for the first time. So I'm wondering, do you have any advice, I guess for anyone really, for students or for professionals, on kind of how to approach something brand new to you?
Oh, wow. I'll have to think about that for a second. I am a person who has always loved learning. And so it doesn't matter to me what I'm learning as long as I'm learning something. So that's a key component to just my personality that I think impacts a lot of the other things. Where, let's see, advice for somebody else on what to do. I guess what I would say is for them to be really specific about the objective. Why is it that you want to learn something? Is it just informational? And if that's the case, then you might just go to the library and find some books and find this and that. Is it to make you a better performer? Well, then you need to find your expert, so that, find somebody who you respect. You'd be surprised who has time to give you and who's open for private lessons. Even though it might be a one-off and not a weekly thing, even one lesson from somebody who is that well respected is going to get you somewhere. And then I guess the other thing I would say is to make sure that just because you have this person over here who teaches this style and this person over here who teaches this other style, and they seem totally disconnected, and you would never think that there's anything musically between the two that is common, then you're not looking hard enough. You need to find what is alike about them and what is different about them, and put the power of those like things together, and that will help you grow faster.
Yeah, probably one of the biggest things is like what you're saying. You'd be surprised who's open to working with you, and like sometimes we're afraid, or we think like oh, I don't know that person, or they're famous, or whatever. But just kind of reaching out and making contact. And the worst thing that can happen is, it doesn't work out, that it turns into a working relationship, but
right,
then you haven't really lost anything.
Right, absolutely. My philosophy in life is, if you don't ask, the answer is definitely no.
Right. Well, no one's going to resent you for asking.
Mm-mm.
I think we all get emails and messages that we just sometimes have to ignore, but we don't resent the people who sent them. It's like, yeah, it's fine to ask, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's such a good attitude, and I like what you said, Carly, about like ego, like getting your ego out of it. I feel like a lot of people seek projects and they seek activity, and they seek new art, not to learn or to get things done, but just to feel good about themselves. You know what I mean? Just to like feel good, like remind yourself, like, yeah, I'm doing really good, and yeah.
It's a hard thing that we do, separating like ourselves from the work that we do, and our sense of ourselves.
Well, we'll have to ask someone who really knows about this someday, because there must be something about like why, it's that question, why you do art at all. It's like, do you make something to learn something? No, not really. You just have this impulse to like create. So is that stroking your own ego, or is it just this, weird innate curiosity? Of course, that's like a much longer, deeper question that I don't think I'm.
I think it's just honoring what is inside of you.
Would you please tell us about this book you're co-authoring with Daniel Glass?
Yeah, so it's entitled The Postcard Project, A Snapshot of Drumming Life, 1900 to 1930. And it is based on a collection of photographs that I have found, come across or hunted down, 300 photographs of drummers from basically from 1904 to 1928.
Awesome.
And in it, I've been able to, see just, I'm going to say, for lack of better terms, weird ways of holding their drumsticks back then. It was a very different time and a very different kind of technique, although we still, what we do as drummers today is still kind of steeped in that same tradition. But then, finding the other resources, digging deeper and finding historical drum method books that show that technique. Well, now I've got somebody who just looks like they're holding their stick weird with a book that's teaching you how to hold that stick weird,
Yeah.
and being able to find not only one, but here's another example and another and another and another. This wasn't just in this town or in this section of the United States. This was in Maine and Missouri and Indiana and Massachusetts. It's like you find it everywhere, or the same thing happening overseas. So you find that those traditions are not only in the United States, but anywhere that organized drumming was happening.
Wow.
So it was a fascinating thing. And to find, a friend of mine just sent some video footage from a Thomas Edison film clip from 1905. And it showed exactly one of the things that was in one of the photographs, one of these series of photographs where I found a half a dozen images of the same thing, which was a mystery to me. I still haven't found what it's technically called in any of the drum books that I've got, but I kind of feel like that might be the next step. But it's one of those things that's already been forgotten to time.
Yeah.
And in just a short 100 years. And so being able to write this book and to bring some of those things back into common knowledge is really exciting.
It must be really cool to when you start to figure out, okay, I found this picture of someone holding a stick weird, but then you start to realize, no, that's not just some outlier. It's
Right.
something we keep finding and we see over and over. And I saw it here and I see it there. And yeah, wow, that must be neat. When do you anticipate y'all will be, the book will be
2 years
published?
ago.
2 years ago? Yeah, of course. Well, that's like every
That's how
good
it
book, though,
goes.
right? So it's going to be good.
We have been working on it, and then we both got just crazily busy. And then it doesn't help that I'm gone, 3 months at a time and things like that. But we're still working on that. We've got a meeting set up for next week to keep work going, making some forward progress on this. But we're so excited about it, and it just is taking longer than we ever imagined it would take.
Yeah.
But it'll be really great. It'll be really great.
It sounds great. I feel like please write into us when it's finished. I think we'll still be doing this a long time from now. So that's the plan. But yeah, please let us know because it's fun to update our listeners with what past guests were doing.
Super happy to do that.
Yeah. Well, wow, Kelli Rae Tubbs, thanks so much for joining us today. Thank
you for having me.
Yeah, sure. And good to see you, Carly. We'll get some more co-hosts with us next time, hopefully.
Well, it's great talking with you, Kelli.
You too.
Cool. All right. Hey, thanks, everyone. We'll catch you on 180 is next, where we'll have, is it John Tafoya?
John Tafoya is up next.
Yeah, cool. All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.